Welcome to Scottish Independence Podcast. It's Fiona and I are here. Well, we're usually here, but we've got two guests with us today. We have Sylvia Wilmot and Jane Davidson. Now, thank you both so much for being prepared to come have a go and join us here on our StreamYard studio. Because to explain to everyone, myself and Sylvia and Jane, we found ourselves having a discussion on Facebook. I put up a post about accident and emergency waiting times comparisons, and the three of us ended up having a chat on it. Well, there was quite a lot of other chat as well, but in particular, the three of us kind of had a bit of an interchange. So I've been wanting to be able to do that for a while, to get a discussion that's going on Facebook and then bring it out of that kind of situation and try it here. Anyway, that's the background to it. I put up this graphic that I put together myself from figures that were on the website called Talking Up Scotland, which is run by John Robertson. He or one of his helpers had put together new data from NHS England for waiting times. So you might think, well, for goodness sake, surely it's been possible to compare Scotland and English NHS waiting times, but it hasn't been because of the way that they calculate things. So in Scotland, the length of time someone waits before either being sent home or sent up to a ward somewhere from an A&E department is calculated from when they enter the A&E department, which is what we mean, isn't it? That's what we kind of mean when we say, oh, I'll be waiting 4 hours, or, you say, oh, I got out after an hour. But in England, they don't count it until there's been a decision to admit them. So they might have been waiting in the A&E for, a few hours before that. So it's never been possible to make comparisons. But I think it's the College of Emergency Medicine. They've been nagging away at the Office of National Statistics to try and get these figures published, because they were there, but they were never made public. So that's a bit of a long story, but that was the background to it. And the three of us just got kind of chatting about how good it would be. I remember you two in particular were saying, how are we going to get this kind of information out wider, out to the public?
It's been, I'm sure you all agree with me, it's so frustrating when you see all this stuff that's made, people have got public platforms and they can spread all this garbage. And you can only counter it to whoever's in your circle or going on and beating away at the keyboard. It's how to get it out into a wider, these people have all got public platforms, and it's really, really weighted so heavily against it. You all agree. So personally, I'm going to get the salient points, things like the NHS, our GDP and where it comes from, and how the GERS figures. That's huge. I can't believe I'm still talking to people who don't know that our money all goes down to Westminster. What? What are you talking about? No, we get that back from it. Well, where do you think it comes from in the first place? So there's a lot of ignorance. So I'm going to get it all into small cards. I'm going to get salient points. Make sure they're all fact-checked. Make sure it's absolutely accurate, 100%.
Yes.
Put it in little cards, elasticize it, get 100 or something like that printed off, 200, whatever. Cost-wise or whatever, and whoever I talk to, from in the card. So it's not just my words going in one ear and out the other, and they don't really take it in. But if you give them the written information, then maybe they'll pass it on. I say, well, you want to take a couple, give to your friends? I don't know. That's what I was thinking. There's nothing much else to do, is there, really, to get a public platform?
Yeah, so it's certainly very difficult, isn't it? That's a really good idea. Have you had any thoughts about it, Sylvia?
Yes, I've had many thoughts. I've got a field, which is actually my daughter's, but my garden is attached to it. And I've got a banner up, which is Believe in Scotland banner, independence is normal. I just feel that's a bit, it doesn't really say anything for me. So I want to have a banner. I've asked somebody who does the graphics, and what I was going to put on it was the BBC and the media tell lies about Scotland constantly, which I feel is true. So that's that's my next step. But I was talking, strangely enough, to a neighbour who happens to be a farmer, who in the past would have voted Tory, but he's disgusted with the lies and the corruption. I was talking to him And then I happen to mention I've been looking at PFI contracts that Labour put in place.
Yes.
I'm appalled, and it's shocking. It's a scandal. That's a real scandal, because billions are going out of Scotland for these contracts. They're running for more than 30 years, a lot of them. And my sister managed a surgery down in Essex for some years, and whilst she was there, they built a new surgery, and she was in charge of the negotiating. And she said the company wanted it to run for 25 years, the contract, and she managed to negotiate it down to 20 years.
Wow.
So whoever put these contracts in place did nothing to mitigate the amount of time they were going to run for. And this is all stuff I've been gathering information. Dr. Megan Smith did an article about PFI contracts across the whole of the UK. And she's listed them all, and I went through them. Again, the interest rate generally on them is at 7%.
Wow.
The interest rate has been zilch in the last decade. The maintenance contracts are costing hugely more to do work than they would normally. It's just a license to take Scotland's money, to me. But, people may think it's not relevant now because they were set up when Labour were in place. But it still is. And where is this money coming from? I know councils apparently are paying 40 billion a year.
Yeah.
Do hospitals come out of the NHS money?
I mean, you'd think probably if it was hospitals, that's coming out of a hospital local NHS budget somewhere.
Yeah.
They've got to be able to cover it, don't they?
Yeah, this is what I wonder.
Can you remember, Sylvia? I can't quite remember why Labour went down that track. There must have been a reason for it.
Well, it was in order to not put the money on the books, so that it looked like they were managing better than perhaps they would have done. To me, it's who negotiated these contracts, who allowed them to go on for so long, who allowed them to have such high interest rates, who allowed the maintenance charges to be so huge. And I do wonder if Labour purposely set them up just before they knew they were going to lose power. I'm afraid I'm a great cynic.
We're questioning what was going through their heads at the time, and it may have been as simple as this is an easy way to get access to more money than we've got at our beck and call. Whereas you think of some of the things that have been going on in Westminster to do with the procurement of, PPI, and now they've got a childcare contract, all these things that are deeply, deeply suspicious in terms of who's benefiting. And I think, Sylvia, you said, who's getting money? Well, that is a really, really good question.
Somebody put up this thing about Lord Jack McConnell on Facebook. It's saying, whilst he was in charge, he sent back 1.5 billion of accrued underspend in Scotland.
Yes, that's right.
That's right, he did. Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it? So you're getting your facts and figures together about the PFI contracts. I suppose they were a bit like taking out a mortgage, wouldn't it? You take out a mortgage, lets you buy the house that you can't pay for it outright, but it lets you buy it over 25 years. Yes. It's kind of equivalent to that. But you'd think there would have been some flexibility in it that, 7% may have been quite a reasonable rate of interest at the time when they were taken out, but nothing's in there to kind of bring it down to all these years when we've had almost zero, very, very low interest rate. So there's that. And Jane, I think that's a good idea about having cards to give out. And gosh, if anyone from Pensioners for Indy is listening to this, they'll probably go, Marlene has not been on a stall with us for months, which is true, but I have done it. You kind of get to know, don't you, that some people are okay whatever you give them, but some people, if you obviously very kind of one-sided, or especially Pensioners for Indy, we wouldn't be giving out party political stuff. But if you give out something that's just straightforward, factual, and it's got somewhere to go and look it up and check on it, actually that's a good way of proceeding, isn't it? Yes. So those wee cards that you're talking about, I think, would be pretty good for that.
And just very important, sort of bullet points, and give them where they can go to check it out themselves if they need to. The other thing I was thinking, actually, Sylvia, what you're saying about the banner, I've got a flag. My pole's broken in the wind, so I'm going to get a new pole.
Yes.
Because I thought a really good one, and maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't, I don't know. But one of the two Davies keeps saying, we're going to do it anyway. And I think that's quite a powerful statement. I mean, put that on a flag. It's all clear. Not yes, we're going to do it anyway.
It's quite a positive one.
Agree with it or not agree with it, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, things are changing so quickly. You really, I feel, need to be constantly changing, as you say, and keeping up with what's happening to make it a kind of a statement against what's being said on the news.
Yeah.
That's kind of the problem as well. Timing's difficult, isn't it? Because something will flash up, and if you've then got to go and research and come up with something and draft it, and the moment's gone. And I was quite intrigued when, I think it was in one of the SNP leadership debate hosting things, when Humza had first few, anyway, he said he was going to have an instant rebuttal unit. And I thought, well, great, but how's that going to work? Because you're going to have somebody, a bank of people monitoring everything, spotting the thing you want to challenge, immediately challenging it.
I mean, it would be great if that actually was set up, and even if there was a bit of a lag, between it being said and then rebutting it. But I mean, that's just take me back again to John Robertson's Talking Up Scotland, and I mean, he's just prolific. I mean, I'm on the email list, so every time he puts a new blog on his website, I get an email through about it, or you get a summary of them. I mean, there can be several in a day, and each of them will have 2 or 3 sort of new examples, and he's very, very good at coming up with the factual stuff and where he's got it and what it means. And I mean, after chatting to both of you on Facebook that day, it did get me thinking again about all the effort that he puts into that. Really, I mean, he's got a lot of people on the mailing list, but I'm not sure it gets much further out. And you do have to put a little bit of effort in with that graph that I did with the comparisons with the A&E times. I mean, I did that, but I used it. I got it from using the figures on his blog. I just thought, maybe if I was doing something, if I was going to do something like that, I'd probably go to John's website and just pick out stuff and just try and get it a bit further, available. Because it's like you're saying, Jane. If you give out maybe you give someone one of those cards once you get them done, and then they pass them on to their neighbour. Even if it's just, I met this woman and look what she gave me, kind of stuff. Yeah, we're used to that, right? We've all been on stalls, we're used to that. But actually, it can still have an effect. It has a kind of outward ripple, and I've been thinking. So it has made me think about just trying to use all the effort and the information that's there on his website.
This is why I thought it would be good to talk. Well, I talked to this neighbour because and why I mentioned the PFI contracts, and he actually admitted himself. He said, they're siphoning money out of Scotland because they're saying that people are turning away from the Tories towards the Labour, those who don't want independence.
Yeah.
I feel at the moment that's why that's so important to bring that back into the news again. Yeah.
And it might be an idea to maybe emphasise Labour. But maybe we need to say, look, this is really what you're going to be voting for if you vote for Labour.
Yes.
I don't know enough about the Labour. I must admit I haven't done enough research about the Labour and what they stand for and what they're going to do. But I'll listen to Starmer and I think, good God, when we will not be joining the EU, the Scottish, you will not get a referendum, and you look at them and think, excuse me, you're supposed to be the left-leaning party. And we are a socialist country in Scotland. And that's why so many people move up here, because they've got so much better up here than it is, down south. You think, well, who are you representing? Because the right wing are amply represented by the Tory.
How much is he going to roll back what they're putting in place? Like coming out of the European Court of Human Rights. I don't know too much about that, but wasn't it the European Court of Human Rights that influenced Blair or Brown to instigate devolved parliaments?
Yeah, I think it was.
everything in place that we didn't have any teeth, though. They did their best to make sure it was just keep them quiet, stick them away in their...
Thinking about Labour coming in, I mean, at least in, at Holyrood, at any rate, Labour have been it's such a long time since anyone's been in power except the SNP, that it actually you can kind of understand, unless you're old enough to have a very long memory, you can understand it. People just don't know. It's not even that they don't remember what Labour was like in Holyrood. They actually don't know because they weren't alive, or, they weren't of an age where they paid any attention to it, really. So that's a good point.
When you're talking about Labour, Wales is very interesting to look at because you can kind of see what perhaps Labour in Scotland would have been doing had they still been in power. But I'm almost quite conflicted about that because some of the things that is going on in Labour-run Wales are really very good. They're working much more closely with Plaid Cymru, which is the independent supporting party, than Scottish Labour would ever deign to do. But it just shows you the power of, if you could get those two groups together, a lot of the values are pretty much the same. And the same with us and Labour. The main point of difference is that independence question. We're thinking of doing perhaps a follow-up on some of the initiatives that are going on in Labour, such as this publicly owned energy company that we voted for, and it seems to have just disappeared off the agenda. But in Wales, they're actually taking it forward using the design that was constructed by Commonweal in Scotland. They're setting up a publicly owned house building company so they can build affordable homes. What a great idea. Why are we not doing that? Why what's stopping us? The difference between the two of them, I get the feeling that Mark Drakeford is somewhat more sympathetic to the Plaid position than Anna Sarwar is to our position.
I think there's a vast difference between Anna Sarwar and Drakeford, completely different. Sarwar is far more doing what he's told by Starmer. And Drakeford is saying, wait a minute, this is you're attacking our devolution.
So I think that's true, and I think Drakeford sees the difference between the kind of Labour Party and Labour policies that he wants to put forward. He sees and the same would go for us up here, although it would be the SNP doing it, we hope. And he sees how that's not reflected in the policies and the rhetoric that you get from Starmer and the Labour Party in Westminster. We do know why that is, isn't it? I mean, it's because the Labour Party have to accommodate to an English electorate that's more to the right than we are in Scotland, and maybe quite a lot of people are in Wales as well. So, I mean, that was what got Blair and Brown in the first place. They moved New Labour, they moved Labour rightwards in order to get into power. And you kind of think, well, I suppose if that's the only way to do it, that's what you have to do. But then the rest of us end up stymied because they're not going to come out and come up with the kind of, more socialist policies that we'd like. It's just another reason why we need out of the union, isn't it?
100%. And the thing that gets me is all the people that will say, I can't stand the SNP. What have they ever done for Scotland? And I just say, come on. I'm not even going to go there. That's just too ridiculous.
When you're talking about little cards, do you know the number of people who don't appreciate the things that are free in Scotland aren't free in the rest of the UK? I mean, my mother lives in England, and she's constantly surprised, outraged actually, at the thing that we get because that's what we as a society have chosen to do. Free education and free prescriptions and all that kind of stuff. Free bus travel. We've probably all got magic bus passes. She's not got that.
Of course we pay for it. It's just that the choices are different,
Yeah. Saying, Fiona, as you're saying, people don't even up here don't necessarily kind of realise that that's been brought in by the Scottish government and isn't available down south. Then you get the other side of that, which is the unionist argument that says, and look, English taxpayers are having to pay for Scottish free bus passes and free prescriptions and elderly care, and we're all paying for that. And you're going, hang on a minute, do you think we don't pay any taxes? Do you think that we just, doesn't happen up here? So
this is horrifying to know how many people actually do think like that.
Yes.
You have casual conversations with people, which I tend to do. So here she comes. But that don't know. If we stay in the union, then the internal market bill is going to level us all out. And they're not going to level up to us. They will level us down to them. So be careful what you vote for. young mothers with children that, what? You're going to lose your baby boxes. Well, grandchildren, they're fantastic. They are fantastic.
Yeah.
And my daughter always says, God, she says, for a new mother, don't understand unionists. I just don't. And I've asked a few times on Facebook, could somebody tell me, give me an argument why we should stay in the union? You know,
And Labour would bring in charges for university because they did. They were the ones who started charging.
Yeah,
right. It's crazy. We will really feel it in Scotland if we don't vote for our independence, don't get our independence. We are really going to suffer because we're going to lose a lot more. Because down in England, the rest of the UK, whatever, they don't have that to lose. We do.
When you think about the private versus public ownership of things, I mean, the very idea that you would live or visit a river that was full of sewage that you'd allowed people to pump there so somebody else could get a profit.
Just add an extra billion to their offshore account. You know, they really do need an extra billion. Yeah. Oh, it's just when you see that on the television, it just breaks your heart. You know.
It does actually. I know. Yeah, I know.
Given that we only have the resources we've got, and often you're up against mainstream media, and how do you find ways of getting out of that? Is it face to face? Is that the best way? I mean, your cards and your posters are both great ideas. If you can maybe get a conversation off the back of them, I think they could be great conversation starters. Yeah. But how else do you manage to do it?
For me, it's about getting people to think. So, you know, making them question, the BBC and the media tell lies. It's like, just to raise that into their train of thought. And I think the cards, you know, bullet points, it makes people think.
I think another thing that we really need to get our heads around is, and I think this is so powerful, if every yes voter converts one no voter, one no to yes, and that's it done. I think that's really quite a powerful.
Yes, and because that's doable, isn't it? That's definitely doable. I mean, we probably, you know, maybe we've done some of it. I've done one. Because my husband didn't yes. He didn't vote yes. I don't think he voted no, but he didn't vote yes. He's a Brummie and he couldn't quite, you know, I just couldn't quite get himself to do it. However, you know, since Brexit, he just went, that's it, fine, enough's enough, I'm voting yes. Next time that was quite an easy. I'm sure he's not the only person who's come round for that particular reason.
What got me round was Brexit, and it highlighted how much they lie. And then, of course, the ongoing corruption since then, which they make no attempt to hide. And that's why I think, for me, talking to this farmer neighbour, because he has brothers in the area and family, and they definitely were staunch Tory voters, but I can't see him ever voting Tory again. And I don't want him voting Labour either.
That's what you have to be careful for.
I did say to him, please take pride in your country.
That's quite a good one. I was at a meeting on Sunday over in Edinburgh, actually, and the subject of the Scottish media came up. Well, basically, there was a statement made by an audience member who said, well, we don't have a Scottish media. We've just got a unionist British media that happens to be a little bit based in Scotland, but they don't really, you know, report what we're thinking and what's important to us. And they don't have to be pro-indie, but they could just at least be unbiased. Trust in the media came up. And then a lady in the audience stood up, and she did have a question, the next question to ask, but she introduced herself. I think she said she was the editor of one of the local papers in Edinburgh, and she was just quoting the evidence that actually people do trust local papers. They might not trust, you know, the Scotsman or the Herald or the National, whatever, but a more local-based paper. She was saying people do trust us, so, you know, support us, keep us going. And I thought, you know, maybe that's another avenue to use, you know, to kind of think about putting a letter into there's a couple of local.
That's a really good idea. Glasgow. But if you put a letter into all of them, then it's very local. It tells you all about the you know, rights and laws.
Unfortunately, our local newspaper is run by a Tory supporter. editor is at all.
Well, I'm going to be surprised if they were as well, because they're all farmers around here. So,
But another way of maybe making the same point, though, but in a more local way, if you have an issue that's very local, people can get engaged with it because it's very local to them, and it might be something they care about, and it might not have any real party political flavour, but that little issue might then lead on to a wider discussion about other things. And, it's a way of engaging people, the conversation. So I think there's a role for local press, even with a Tory editor. I'm trying to think what the Alloa advertisers' persuasion is. I don't know is the answer. But I mean, I've certainly found that they're delighted to get any kind of contribution from readers, whether it's a couple of photos and we've certainly put in photos of quite subtle things like people litter picking, but with a yes badge on that.
I was just thinking before we finish, have either of you got any ideas about how to persuade, the over 65 age group? Because it's that age group, which I am well into. Well, it's come up from, I think it was about 25% yes in 2014. We tend to be up about 32, 33, 34% now. And again, it's like, saying if we all persuaded one person, we'd do it. If we all persuaded a couple of other folk of our age group, then that might do it as well. But it's kind of hard to get a way in, isn't it?
yeah.
The election that happened last week. No, it's all gone. You've missed it.
Voter ID. Need to bring your parents with you.
I mean, up down here, the older folk are really set in their ways, Oh, it's always been like that. It's always been like that. It doesn't have to stay like that. For God's sake, for your kids and your grandkids,
Yes, that's sometimes a way to try and do it, isn't it? To say, look, what is it you want? Okay, that's what you think at the moment. But what do you want for your kids? What do you want for your grandkids? If you've got them, that's. And another thing is also then to try and get the grandkids to talk to their grandparents.
Yeah,
give them their point of view. That's maybe another kind of a approach.
I find trying to have a conversation with my Tory mother is extremely stressful for both of us. But she'll sit and chat to my son, her grandson, quite happily, even though they come from very, very different ends of the spectrum in terms of their views. That was a really clever campaign that went on in, was it Dublin, I think, one of the university in Dublin, when they were having their votes on equal marriage. And they had a campaign of students to phone up their grandparents and just have a chat with them about, what are you thinking of voting? And have you thought about this and from this angle? And because it was coming from people they loved, it was a much easier conversation to have.
I think it was my grandson's birthday. So my daughter's partner, they're all unionists, I'm afraid. There's myself and one of the older gentlemen. There was something. He's an absolute unionist because I'm spouting off all this stuff to him and everything. And then I looked at him. I was in the garden. All the cousins were running around. They were playing. They were jumping in the bouncy castle. They're having a ball. And I said, "Look, it's not about you and me. We've had our time. We're important." And he kind of went quiet. I mean, he hasn't changed his mind one iota, but he went quiet. And this is their future. Their future.
Their future.
And it did. Then you could stop and think, it's not about us, it's about them.
80% of them support independence as well. So that's the other thing.
I think that's a very good point, Jane. I think that's a very good point. And I'd like to put that on a banner too.
Oh, yeah. You need more banners. That's it. Big field.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's been really good chatting to both of you. And again, just say again, thanks so much for coming on. And Sylvia, if you carry on getting that information together about the PFI, if you want to write that up, we'll put it out on Scottish Independence podcast blog on our website. It'll get a few. I wouldn't say it's like thousands and thousands, but it will get some views actually. So let us know where you go with it, and we could do something.
Tag us in on things if you do, Twitter or Facebook, and we'll share it because we've got reasonable number of followers now.
Following. Yeah, and similarly, Jane, once you get the cards done,
it's done.
Get in touch and we can do something with that.
Yes.
See how it goes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.